All right, let's jump right in today. We're doing a deep dive into Thailand's economy and stock market.
Oh, interesting.
And specifically, we're looking at it through the lens of former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra.
Okay.
And, you guys have sent in a bunch of sources about this. And it looks like Thaksin's got some pretty bold ideas, maybe some controversial ones too.
Yeah. What I think is so interesting about this is we're not just getting sort of like a theoretical wish list,
Right.
These sources actually reveal Thaksin's strategies. It's almost like a playbook for how he would revitalize Thailand.
So our mission today, right, is to unpack those strategies, see what the potential is, and maybe point out where things could get a little bit complicated.
Uh-huh.
And it's important, I think, to start with the context here. The sources, they don't really sugarcoat Thailand's current economic situation.
Yeah. No, not at all. There's a real sense of urgency that comes across. And multiple sources highlight concerns about Thailand's growth rate, hovering around 3%, especially when you compare it to a neighbor like Malaysia, which is at 5.6%.
Right. So it's almost like everyone in Thailand's looking over their shoulder, like, why aren't we keeping up with the competition?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where Thaksin's argument comes in. He repeatedly uses this phrase, Thailand has a bright future, but lacks proper management. It's kind of loaded, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's optimistic, like there's potential waiting to be unlocked.
Right.
But it also feels like a critique.
Yeah.
Like someone's not doing their job.
Oh, it's definitely a dig at the current leadership, suggesting that they're not maximizing Thailand's opportunities.
Yeah.
But it's also really clever framing.
Yeah.
Because by focusing on the management aspect, he's essentially positioning his solutions as the answer.
Right.
Like he's the expert consultant.
He's coming in to save the day.
Exactly.
All right, so let's get into those solutions.
All right.
And to keep things organized, I think we should tackle these by themes instead of going source by source. So, first up, the stock market. One detail that stood out to me was that Thaksin actually went and spoke directly to stock market executives.
Oh, wow. So he's not just talking. He's actually engaging, with the people running things. That's a pretty interesting tactic. It's about building buy-in, I guess.
Yeah, and he doesn't hold back. He gets right into some big issues like corporate governance. But he's not just saying, be better. He actually gets super specific.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's calling for this ongoing monitoring of executive behavior.
Like a health checkup.
Yeah, almost like a health checkup for companies.
Okay.
It's all about, ensuring transparency and accountability.
Gotcha.
Then there's high-frequency trading. I'll be honest, this is where I needed a little help understanding exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's a complicated topic. Basically, it involves using powerful computers to execute these super fast trades, often for tiny profits. Now, it generates a ton of volume, which markets typically love, but Thaksin, he argues it's actually harmful in the long run.
So he's basically saying it's all about speculation and these quick wins, but not actual investment in those underlying companies.
Exactly, like a casino almost.
Yeah.
And it's such a fascinating paradox because you have all this activity, but it's not necessarily the kind that leads to real sustainable growth,
Yeah, and then, of course, you've got the regulator, the SEC.
Right.
And Thaksin, he doesn't mince words. He compares their decision-making process to needing permission from 12 different agencies just to do anything.
It's like they're stuck in bureaucracy.
Yeah, he's basically saying they can't react quickly enough to what's happening in the markets.
Right. He
really wants to streamline regulations and give the SEC, the power to act decisively, almost like a referee who can make calls in real time.
I see.
Okay, so that's kind of a glimpse of Thaksin's stock market playbook, right? Transparency, long-term focus, and agility. But his vision doesn't stop there. These sources show he's got some big plans for revitalizing the whole Thai economy.
It's impressive, the breadth. He touches on everything from embracing the digital revolution to overhauling infrastructure, even tapping into Thailand's cultural strengths.
There's this really fascinating example about cryptocurrency where he proposes this sandbox approach. Now, I know cryptocurrency can be volatile, but what does a sandbox have to do with it?
Well, think of a sandbox like a safe space to experiment, right?
Right.
So new financial technologies can be tried out within this sandbox environment.
Okay.
With relaxed regulations, fostering innovation, but still managing risk.
So Thailand could become this hub for trying out new crypto ideas, attracting investment and talent in this booming sector.
Absolutely. It's about positioning Thailand as a leader in the digital economy, not a follower.
And then there's infrastructure. Thaksin proposes this massive redevelopment of state-owned land. He talks about using 99-year leases. It sounds like, a smart way to get private investment without permanently giving up that land.
Yeah, it's a strategy that many countries use, but it requires careful management.
Right.
We'd have to look at the specifics to see who really benefits most.
And speaking of specifics, there's this idea that jumps out about a, quote, cognitive city powered by AI and surveillance. Now, I'm all for, smart cities and everything, but this sounds a bit like a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, it is ambitious.
Yeah.
Imagine a city that can anticipate traffic flow, optimize energy use, even predict crime hotspots.
Wow.
But you're right, it does raise questions about privacy and control.
Yeah.
Like, how much are we willing to share, to give up?
For the sake of efficiency, yeah.
For safety, for efficiency.
Okay, so we've got this digital revolution, infrastructure overhaul. What else is on Thaksin's economic menu here?
Well, he also really stresses the importance of soft power, right? So leveraging Thailand's cultural strengths to attract new markets and diversify the economy.
This is where he gets really specific, talking about training chefs, Muay Thai fighters, even esports players.
It sounds like an interesting mix.
It does, right.
But it's actually really smart when you think about it because it aligns with Thailand's existing strengths.
Okay.
Imagine world-renowned culinary schools in Thailand, exporting Thai cuisine and expertise globally.
Wow.
Or Muay Thai training camps, attracting athletes and tourists from all over the world.
Okay.
It's about building a brand, building an image that goes beyond, traditional tourism.
Right. It's like, we're already good at this, let's become the best.
Exactly.
But what I found really interesting is that Thaksin doesn't just talk about these, big, shiny ideas. He actually gets into some of the nitty-gritty problems that Thailand's been facing for a long time.
Oh, like what?
Well, take PM 2.5 air pollution. He basically says no more support for farmers who burn crops.
That's pretty drastic.
Yeah, it's a hard line, right?
But wouldn't that punish farmers who are already struggling?
That's the thing, right? The sources do mention that often farmers resort to burning because it's the cheapest, fastest way to clear their fields.
Yeah.
So Thaksin's approach, it might, force them to change, but it could also backfire, lead to even more resentment, more illegal burning.
It's a risk.
Yeah, it feels like a gamble. And it brings up this, this recurring theme in Thaksin's thinking, this reliance on strong measures.
You mean like a bit authoritarian?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where his history is so important, right? The sources remind us that Thaksin's a very polarizing figure.
Yeah.
Praised for what he did for the economy, but also criticized for those tendencies towards authoritarianism.
So it's like his personality, his past, it's all shaping how he approaches these challenges.
Yeah, exactly. And for our listeners, it's not just about the policies, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's also about understanding the mind of the person behind these proposals.
Right, because it gives you insight into their motivations.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's fascinating, right, how economics and politics, they're so intertwined in this whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
You gave us these sources that not only lay out Thaksin's ideas, but you can kind of see the potential pushback, right? The challenges he might face.
It's like watching a chess game,
Yeah.
Thaksin makes a move, and then you have to think, okay, what are all the possible responses, the counter moves?
Exactly. Like, for example, his stance on PM 2.5 pollution, no support for farmers who burn crops.
Right.
It sounds great in theory, but how would that play out in reality?
Well, the sources mention, farmers often resort to burning because it's the cheapest way, the fastest way to clear their fields.
Yeah.
So, his approach, it could actually backfire, lead to more resentment.
Right.
Maybe even more illegal burning.
It highlights the need for more than just, punishment. Maybe you need financial incentives or technology that makes those sustainable practices easier for farmers.
So instead of just punishing them, you give them another option.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about his proposal to cut off utilities and telecom to neighboring countries to try to stop those scam call centers?
I mean, it's bold, no question.
It is, yeah.
But is it even legal?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing,
It seems like it would cause like a major international incident.
Yeah.
It's a huge legal gray area, questions about international law, sovereignty, the potential for retaliation.
Right.
Plus, it doesn't address the root cause, right?
Which is
the lack of opportunity, the lack of economic opportunity that drives people to these criminal activities.
right. So it's almost like putting a Band-Aid on a much, much bigger problem.
Exactly.
And, this kind of brings us back to this theme we were talking about earlier.
What's that?
Thaksin's, tendency to rely on strong, maybe even authoritarian measures.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? He seems to favor that quick action, decisive action,
Yeah.
even if it means, maybe alienating certain groups or having these unintended consequences.
Right. So it's really important to understand his history, right?
Yeah.
The sources paint him as, this polarizing figure. People praise him for the economy, but they also criticize those tendencies.
So his past, his personality, it's all informing how he approaches these problems today.
Yeah, it's all connected. And for our listeners, it's crucial to keep that in mind.
Right.
It's not just about, okay, here's the policy.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the person behind it.
The motivations.
Yeah, the why.
The why.
Okay, so we've talked about some potential, downsides. But to be fair, Thaksin also has some genuinely intriguing ideas that could really help Thailand, right?
Absolutely.
I love his focus on developing what he calls soft power. Training chefs, Muay Thai fighters, esports players.
It's such a diverse mix.
It is, but it's smart.
But it's smart because it taps into what Thailand is already known for.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine a one-class culinary school in Thailand.
Right.
You'd attract aspiring chefs from all over the world.
You would boost tourism.
Yeah, boost tourism.
And also export that knowledge, right?
Yeah. Thai cuisine, the expertise, going global.
Right.
And then Muay Thai training camps, athletes, fitness enthusiasts, all coming to Thailand.
And then the whole world of esports, which is just booming.
It's about building a brand, an image for Thailand that's more than just the tourist spots.
Right. It's about taking what you're already good at and becoming the best.
Exactly.
And then, his proposal to get companies to move their headquarters out of Bangkok.
Right.
Ambitious, sure. But it can solve a lot of problems at once.
You're thinking relieve congestion in Bangkok.
Yeah.
Stimulate growth in rural areas, maybe even bridge that urban-rural divide.
Exactly. But the devil's in the details, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It would take a lot, incentives,
yeah,
infrastructure.
Means a reason to move.
Yeah, it can't just be a suggestion.
It has to be a real, tangible benefit.
It feels like Thaksin's always thinking long-term,
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just about today's problems, but positioning Thailand for success way down the line.
And that's so important for our listeners to remember, when you're evaluating these proposals, think about the long-term implications, not just the immediate impact.
Yeah, it's like planting seeds, right?
Yeah.
It might take years, even decades, to see the full results.
But you also got to think about the soil, right?
The soil.
Yeah, the conditions, the political climate, the social dynamics, the global economy, all of that will affect whether those seeds actually grow.
It's a complex ecosystem.
It is.
Okay, before we move on, I want to touch on something we talked about before, but it keeps coming up in the sources.
What's that?
This whole digitalization thing. Thaksin's really pushing Thailand to embrace the digital revolution.
He's right, though. The world is changing so fast.
Yeah.
Thailand can't afford to be left behind.
He's particularly interested in cryptocurrency. He even talks about using a sandbox approach to foster innovation.
Right. So a sandbox, remember, it's like a controlled environment where you can test new things without all the normal rules and regulations.
Right.
It allows for experimentation while still managing the risk.
Okay.
Crypto, it's known for being volatile, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no centralized regulation, it's often driven by speculation.
Okay.
So a sandbox, it could help mitigate those risks.
So Thailand could become like a testing ground for new crypto ideas.
Exactly. And that could be a huge advantage, being at the forefront of that industry.
It's a gamble, but
Right.
potentially a big payoff.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, but there's one more piece of this puzzle that I think is really important.
Right.
Thaksin's role in all of this. He's not in the government anymore,
No.
but he's clearly trying to shape the agenda.
He's a powerful voice, that's for sure.
He's got the experience, the connection.
And the baggage, right.
Right.
Let's not forget his history, his controversial past.
So the question is, are his motives purely altruistic?
Yeah.
Is he just doing this for the good of Thailand?
Or is there something else going on?
Yeah.
It's something our listeners need to consider.
And let's not forget, he's also a successful businessman
Right.
with ties to various industries.
Yeah, the sources mention how he name drops specific companies, NVIDIA, Chinese EV makers.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is. It makes you wonder, is he just pushing what he thinks is best for Thailand, or are there, some personal interests mixed in there?
And we talk a lot about investors and the markets.
Yeah.
But why should everyday people care about all of this? Even people outside of Thailand.
That's a great question. What's the so what for our listener, right?
Well, for one, Thailand is a major player in global supply chains.
Okay.
So what happens there affects what we consume all over the world.
Right.
And let's not forget, tourism, if Thaksin's plans work, it could mean a completely different experience for people visiting Thailand.
Okay, so even if you never invest in Thai stocks, these proposals could still impact your life.
Absolutely.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, let's recap a bit.
Okay.
We've looked at Thaksin's proposals for revitalizing Thailand's economy and stock market, everything from corporate governance to crypto to infrastructure.
And we've talked about the good and the bad, the potential benefits and the risks.
Right, and we've discussed Thaksin's role in all of this, his history, his connections, and how that might influence his vision.
Yeah, it's a complex picture.
But there's this one theme that keeps coming up in the sources, something Thaksin really emphasizes.
You're talking about unity.
Exactly. He says that for any of this to work, Thailand needs to overcome its divisions and work together.
It's a powerful message.
He even says he's willing to, quote, buy wine for his opponents just to get them to stop fighting.
Wow.
And focus on building a better future for Thailand.
So he's acknowledging the political reality.
He is, but it also highlights this paradox.
What do you mean?
Well, he's calling for unity, but at the same time, he's a divisive figure himself.
It's a tough situation.
It is, and it's something our listeners should keep in mind as we move into the final part of our deep dive.
Can a country really thrive economically if it's deeply divided politically and socially?
It's a question worth pondering, and we'll explore it further in the next part of our deep dive.
It's what makes this whole deep dive so compelling,
Yeah.
It's not just about the numbers, the economic indicators.
Right.
It's about people.
It is, yeah.
Their hopes, their anxieties.
Yeah, their dreams for something better.
And these sources, even though they're focused on the economics, they keep reminding us that Thailand's journey is a human one, right?
Yeah, it's not just about, GDP growth. No.
It's about finding a way forward that works for everyone.
That benefits everyone.
Not just, a small group at the top.
And that's where the real challenge lies, right?
Right, exactly.
Thaksin's ideas, they're bold, they're ambitious,
Yeah.
but you can't just, snap your fingers and implement them.
Right. There's a whole context.
They have to be considered within the social and political landscape of Thailand.
It's like solving a puzzle where the pieces are always moving.
A very dynamic puzzle. Yeah.
And that's what's made this deep dive so interesting.
I agree.
It's made us really think critically, challenge our own assumptions, and see how everything's connected, the economics, the politics, the society.
And we've seen how important it is to get different perspectives.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't just rely on one source, one viewpoint to understand what's happening.
It's too complex.
Way too complex.
And now I'm curious, what are our listeners taking away from this? Yeah, what really resonated with you?
What parts of the puzzle stand out? What questions are you still thinking about?
Because this is where, your deep dive begins, right?
Exactly. This is just the starting point.
You take all of this, you process it, you connect the dots, and maybe you come up with insights that we didn't even think of.
That's the best part, when you discover something new on your own.
It's a journey.
It is. And remember, we've only just scratched the surface here.
There's so much more out there.
Keep being curious, keep asking questions, keep digging deeper.
Absolutely.
And, by doing that, you're actually contributing to a better understanding of Thailand, of its place in the world.
You're becoming part of the conversation.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Remember that idea of the cognitive city that we talked about?
Yeah, the city powered by AI and surveillance.
It's a vision of the future, right?
It is.
And it could revolutionize how we live, but it also raises some big ethical questions.
Yeah, about privacy, about control.
About the balance between security and freedom.
So here's the question we want you to think about.
Can Thailand or any country really harness the power of technology
without giving up those core values?
It's a question that's going to shape, not just Thailand's future, but all of our futures.
And the answers aren't going to come from, some textbook or an economic report.
It's going to come from us, from having these conversations, thinking critically, and being willing to face the complexity of a world that's changing so fast.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
This is just the beginning.
And we'll be here, ready for the next deep dive, whenever you are.
Yeah, keep those sources coming.
Absolutely. And until then, happy exploring.
Goodbye for now.